Well, we have a lot to begin with this morning, including the TikTok under the microscope.
Congress is pushing to make major changes, possibly even an outright ban. It's a move that could impact millions of Americans. So today, TikTok's CEO will appear before lawmakers at the Capitol to defend his company from accusations that the Chinese-owned app is a pawn of that country's communist leadership. This will be his first appearance before a congressional panel. He's expected to tell lawmakers that TikTok is safe and secure and won't be accessed or influenced by the Chinese government. He's also expected to confirm that TikTok now boasts 150 million American users. That's roughly 45% of the entire country. And for many of those users, this is how they make a living. For more, we are joined by NBC News congressional correspondent Julie Sirkin, as well as Jamil Jaffer, who is the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute and a former associate White House counsel to President George W. Bush. Julie, let's start with you. What can we expect today? What is at stake here?
Well, good morning, Joe. Look, this is going to be a marathon hearing, nearly 4.5 hours. There are 50 members on the Republican-led Energy and Commerce Committee. And look, the TikTok CEO is going to be in the hot seat because there are a lot of themes here, from national security to how these TikTok influencers make a living on this platform. Fortunately for the CEO, the influencers descended on the Capitol yesterday, making largely the case for him. We heard from so many of them saying that they are small businesses, their livelihoods rely on this app. We heard from others also talking about the political organizing that happens on the app, the community that they're finding there. But in the end, there is bipartisan opposition from Democrats and Republicans to the app. Already half the states in the country have posed some restrictions on government phones, especially now we know there is a bill that is supported by top high-ranking Democrats on intelligence panels to outright ban the platform altogether. And the CEO of this platform is going to try to make the case to prevent that from happening. But all signs are pointing to the fact that he's going to have a very hard time doing this. There's going to be freedom of speech, privacy concerns that lawmakers are going to bring up. So just a lot to watch here this morning as this hearing gets underway.
Jamil, talk us through the concerns that some of those lawmakers have when it comes to the safety of TikTok. With millions of users here in the U.S., is the damage done at this point? Can you put this genie back in the bottle?
Well, look, obviously, as more people start to adopt TikTok and use it, and new users come on board, their data may be exposed to the Chinese. The core concern about TikTok is that this tremendous amount of user data that app collects. And while, look, TikTok says that today their app doesn't collect this type of data or that type of data, there's largely an admission that over the long run of TikTok's history, it has collected a tremendous amount of information of U.S. users, including location and user groups and the like, and has shared that with employees of TikTok in China and potentially is accessible to the Chinese government. As a result, that concern about all this user data going to China being accessible to the government is the biggest concern with TikTok. And then on top of that, Joe, of course, is the concern about Chinese manipulation of the data that's on TikTok and the information that's being conveyed, including potential misinformation and disinformation in the political sphere.
So, Julie, we've talked about the security issues, we've talked about the financial issues, but let's be clear, this is Washington. There is a political aspect to all this. We know there's concern from Democrats that banning TikTok could alienate some young voters. Now, a new Washington Post poll did find more than 40% of Americans would support a ban. What are you hearing from lawmakers? How close are we to an actual ban?
Well, look, this is not going to happen tonight or tomorrow. This is obviously months away. This would be a very significant move. And with Democrats in control of the Senate and in the White House, this affects their base, their voter base, a little bit more than Republicans. And that's pretty understood. You have most of this user base, nearly 138 million, that are of voting age. And that is super significant. And one of the arguments that was made even on TikTok as this press conference was being live streamed in the comments were we helped put President Biden in the White House. We talk about organizing on issues like abortion in these states where restrictions and bans are taking place. So they're making the case to Democrats, especially to President Biden, look, don't bite off the hand that feeds you. We put you in the White House. Pay attention to our concerns. But obviously, the White House Senate Intelligence Chairman Mark Warner, who is leading the cause, leading the charge on this bill, are saying the national security concerns outweigh any political benefits we might be having. But it is certainly a concern for Democrats, especially on this panel as the hearing gets underway. That's something they're paying attention to, despite maybe publicly saying they're not.
So, Jamil, is there anything lawmakers can do or the Biden administration can do to address these safety concerns but stop short of an outright ban?
Well, Joe, one of the things, as Julie was laying out, that TikTok is trying to say it's going to do is they're engaging what they call Project Texas, about $1.5 billion plan to bring all U.S. user data to the U.S. and put it under what they say would be only U.S. employee access. But the reality is that TikTok has made these claims before. They've said the data is not going to be sent over to China. Then we find out through leaked disclosures that, in fact, the data is in China, that it is accessible to the Chinese government. And the fact of the matter is that TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, remains susceptible to Chinese government pressure and Chinese government influence and the laws in China. So even though TikTok may have a separate subsidiary and the data here in the U.S., there's still a very real possibility and a very significant concern amongst U.S. consumers and lawmakers that American data is going to end up in the hands of the Chinese government, which has, by the way, already stolen tremendous amounts of U.S. user data, whether we're talking about hacks against credit card rating companies, financial institutions, hotels, or the U.S. OPM database with all that security clearance information in it.
Huge story today. Julie Sirkin and Jamil Jaffer, thank you for kicking us off this hour. Turning now to yesterday's highly anticipated interest rate decision by the Federal Reserve, which could impact your finances.
Yeah, despite the recent turmoil in the banking sector, the Fed pushed ahead with its expected quarter-point rate hike. Chair Jerome Powell said the path to bringing inflation down would be a long and bumpy one, but he signaled the rate increases are nearing an end.
We believe, however, that events in the banking system over the past 2 weeks are likely to result in tighter credit conditions for households and businesses, which would in turn affect economic outcomes. It is too soon to determine the extent of these effects, and therefore too soon to tell how monetary policy should respond. As a result, we no longer state that we anticipate that ongoing rate increases will be appropriate to quell inflation.
Caleb Silver is the editor-in-chief at Investopedia, and he joins us now for more on this. Caleb, thanks for being here this morning. So the Fed's still focused on fighting inflation. This rate hike was expected. Why did the markets react the way they did yesterday?
Yeah, something didn't sit right. So there were two things going on. There was Fed Chair Powell's press conference when he was talking about the fact that additional tightening may be necessary. That was good news. You saw the market spike on that. But while he was talking, Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, was talking to the Senate Appropriations Committee, saying they wouldn't necessarily guarantee a backstop on all depositors for all banks. So you had those two things going on at the same time. And then Powell also saying if it weren't for the situation with the banks, the Fed may have raised rates even more. So what we now know is that we're going to have high rates for a long time.
So Powell said that the banking system was, quote, sound and resilient, but he did acknowledge more needs to be done to prevent collapses like what we saw with Silicon Valley Bank. Let's listen to more of what he said.
A Silicon Valley Bank management failed badly. They grew the bank very quickly. They exposed the bank to significant liquidity risk and interest rate risk. Didn't hedge that risk. My only interest is that we identify what went wrong here. It's clear that we do need to strengthen supervision and regulation.
So you made a key. We needed to watch what Powell said afterward. Do you think his comments are enough to ease concerns about the banking system, or are there worries this hike, even though it's smaller, could still impact smaller banks moving forward?
Yeah, and he was asked about that as well. So not only are they investigating what happened with Silicon Valley Bank, the Fed is investigating itself to see how it might have missed some of these warning signs that were happening within that bank. So yeah, we know that this is impacting banks and banks' balance sheets, these higher rates, but we also know that they're going to be higher for longer. I said, listen to the words he said. The language was soft, but the dot plot, again, the most boring but yet a most important chart right now in economics and finance is showing the Fed's going to keep interest rates high through next year, and that's not sitting right with investors, and it's going to be trouble for these banks' balance sheets.
And Caleb, what about the average American? What's your advice to people who are trying to navigate their own finances through all of this?
Yeah, as far as your bank is concerned, you're probably safe. And the government has said it will step in. As far as the stock market is concerned, it's going to be choppy for a while because high rates and this ongoing battle with inflation that really doesn't seem to be letting up is going to take a while to play through. So I think you got to be patient right now. The market will eventually recover here and we'll get back up. But we're not going to go back to the way things were. High interest rates are going to weigh on us for a while, and that's going to put pressure on stocks.
All right, Caleb Silver, thanks for breaking that down for us. Well, we're following major developments this morning in two separate investigations into former President Donald Trump. One, of course, is the ongoing grand jury investigation here in New York. being conducted by the Manhattan DA.
The other involves the special counsel investigation into Trump's handling of classified documents. Now, a source briefed on proceedings told NBC News that a U.S. district judge made a key ruling in that case. He found that the office of special counsel Jack Smith, shown here, had presented enough evidence to establish that former President Trump may have committed a crime through his attorneys. This means that one of the president's attorneys may now be made to testify before a federal grand jury, despite attorney-client privilege. Here with more on both those cases is NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard and NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney. Ken, let's start with you in that ruling we are learning about here. It surrounds the DOJ documents case. The judge was not ruling on whether the former president was guilty of a crime, right? He was confirming that Trump's attorney, Evan Corcoran, can now be compelled to testify in the case because the judge came to the conclusion a crime may have been committed through him. So is that right? And can you walk us through exactly what we know here and why it's important?
Good morning, Joe. Yeah, that's about right. This is a deeply significant ruling in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case because it goes to the question of obstruction of justice beyond just mishandling the classified documents. It goes to the heart of this question of when Trump's lawyers presented the Department of Justice with an affidavit back in June saying there had been a search and no classified documents were found. And then 3 months later, the FBI found more than 100 classified documents, including some in Donald Trump's office. What happened there? Did Trump's lawyers lie to the DOJ? Did Donald Trump lie? Was there a mistake made? So that's what they're looking into here. And what this judge, Beryl Howell, has ruled is that the Justice Department can pierce attorney-client privilege. She's ruled that the crime fraud exception applies here, and they can compel a Trump attorney named Evan Corcoran to provide documents to the grand jury and to go and testify about his conversations. That normally doesn't happen. A lawyer almost never has to testify against their client. But the DOJ is going to try to get to the bottom of why was that statement, that false statement made to the Justice Department? Was it Donald Trump's doing or was it the lawyer's doing? So this is a big, big deal.
Yeah, Trump's legal team's appealing the ruling, so it's possible it could be overturned, right? I mean, what's next in this case?
Well, Joe, it's been widely reported that the appeals court has sided with the Justice Department. And it's been also reported that the lawyer, Evan Corcoran, is scheduled to testify tomorrow before the grand jury. Now, we haven't confirmed the appeals decision. We're looking at a docket that we believe is that case that reflects that. And if that's the case, then really there's very little recourse other than an emergency appeal to the Supreme Court, which is unlikely to intervene in this case. So it seems really likely that this lawyer, Evan Corcoran, is going to have to testify and provide information to this investigation, and that is a significant development.
Is there any chance the outcome of this ruling can impact any of these other cases that former President Trump is currently involved in?
No, this is a discrete ruling about a particular set of facts in this classified documents case. But what it does is it elevates it to a different level. It's one thing for the Justice Department to be considering whether to charge Donald Trump with crimes related to the mishandling of classified documents. That's always been a tough case. After all, he was the president. He had access to these documents at one point. But obstruction of justice is a different matter. The Justice Department cannot turn away from that. If it's proven that Donald Trump caused his lawyers to lie to the DOJ to violate a grand jury subpoena, that is a big deal. That's something that the special counsel and the attorney general cannot ignore, Joe.
All right. Ken Delaney and Ken, thank you so much.
You bet.
All right, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard with the latest on the New York grand jury proceedings. Vaughn, good morning to you. So walk us through what happened yesterday. Are there any details as to why the jury was asked to stay home? And are there any insights to what's in store for today?
Right, Steve, we know that those grand jurors were told to be on standby here this afternoon. It's not clear why they did not ultimately convene yesterday. These grand jury proceedings are secret. That is what provides so many questions around this process. Of course, it was Donald Trump over the weekend who suggested he was going to be arrested on Tuesday. But at this point, still today, charges have yet to even be filed or approved by the grand jury. And so there is the possibility that there are no more witnesses, that Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan district attorney, could ask the grand jurors to approve charges of Donald Trump today, or potentially there could be multiple witnesses yet to come forward. It is not clear whether we are hours away from an indictment or whether we could potentially even be weeks away from an indictment. That is what is so, I guess, a mystery here at this point, Stephen.
Yeah, it's got a lot of people watching that clock, Vaughn. Well, has the former president responded to this delay for the grand jury at all?
Yes, he has suggested here, again, he is not privy to what is happening inside of that grand jury room either. But Donald Trump is suggesting that the former legal advisor to Michael Cohen, who went and testified before the grand jury earlier this week and questioned the credibility, undercut Michael Cohen's statements, essentially contradicting him in front of the grand jury. He believed that that was part of the reason as to why the grand jury had yet to indict. Donald Trump, I am told, does not want to be arrested. That would make him, force him to go up to not only be arraigned in New York City, but go through a criminal proceeding. Of course, his team says that they are ready to try to take political advantage of this moment here if that were to happen. At the same time, they are hoping that Alvin Bragg, in their words, steps back from the ledge and decides to not go forward with ultimately an attempt at a prosecution.
Definitely something historic to be seen if an arrest does happen, Vaughn. We're also learning more about some of the alleged documents that were provided to the district attorney. Rob Costello has shared hundreds of emails with NBC News related to Michael Cohen. What did those emails have to say?
Right. Again, this is at the heart of this case here is Michael Cohen, we believe, is the key witness. He was the former fixer for Donald Trump, the one who actually paid the $130,000 to Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election. And Robert Costello was his one-time ally, his one-time legal advisor, and he is now contradicting Michael Cohen's own testimony, saying that Michael Cohen embellished what ultimately happened in an effort to just take down Donald Trump. Now, Robert Costello presented documents over to the district attorney's office. Ultimately, it's important to note how this grand jury process works. It is the district attorney, the prosecutor, who gets to decide what evidence and what witnesses are brought forward to the grand jury when seeking an indictment from the grand jury. Ultimately, the defense of, if Donald Trump is in fact charged, the actual trial would take place in front of a different jury months down the road. So this grand jury process is a much easier step. It's having reasonable doubt that a crime was committed in order to press charges against Donald Trump. And so that is where the Trump's allies are hoping that Costello's documents and testimony keep Bragg from charging Donald Trump. But at this point, it's really in the Manhattan District Attorney's court here at this point.
A lot to keep up with. Vaughn Hilliard coming to us live from a picturesque postcard there in Florida. Vaughn, thanks so much. Now to a very different type of weather. California, a small tornado touched down just outside of Los Angeles.
Yeah, you're going to see it here right now. And this was a hard hit to the area. These systems are all connected to the 12th atmospheric river of the season, with heavy winds and rain covering the state.
Let's bring in meteorologist Michelle Grossman for more on the major storms making their way across the country. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning to you both. Yeah, we're watching a few things today. And by the way, that tornado was the strongest to impact the LA area since 1983. It had winds of 110 miles per hour. The good news is today, Southern California getting a bit of a break. We do have another Pacific storm moving on shore, but that's taking aim at the Pacific Northwest. We're going to see high mountain snow once again, and also some lower elevation rain. We're also watching a storm system off to the east in the Ohio Valley. That's going to bring the chance of heavy rain. We could see 5 inches over the next several days. That's going to bring flash flooding, some flooding concerns, as well as the risk of severe weather in portions of the south today. So let's get to it because there's a lot going on. We have a nearly stationary front. It's not completely stationary, but it's moving very, very slowly. That means we're going to see rounds of heavy rain as we go throughout today in portions of the Ohio Valley. We have some morning showers in the Northeast and New England. We'll get a little break before some rain comes back into the forecast there. And then by later on this evening into the nighttime hours, we do have a severe weather risk from Texas to Oklahoma. We're looking at the main threats being large hail, 2 inches or higher, some really gusty winds, some heavy rainfall. Could see a tornado or two, although that threat increases tomorrow in portions of the Gulf Coast states into the lower Mississippi Valley. Then tomorrow, there's that area of low pressure moving painfully slow. So you see that rain still falling in the Ohio Valley. You see a lot of bright colors, the reds, the oranges, the yellows. That's telling us where that heavy rain will be falling. So not moving very far as we go throughout the next couple of days. And then we are watching the chance for dangerous storms possible throughout the south and then into the lower Mississippi Valley. Saturday, moving into portions of the northeast. We have snow for parts of the Midwest as some colder air works in on the backside of this system. Also some snow for the Great Lakes. But it's going to be a soggy day for the Mid-Atlantic, for the Northeast, so that's kicking off our weekend, and then we'll clear it out on Sunday. Here's a flood watch. We have 19 million people impacted from portions of Oklahoma into the Ohio Valley. You see some red there, too. That is a flash flood warning, and we're going to see those coming in and out of our flood watch as we go throughout the day. But this is over the next couple of days because of that front not moving very far. Concerned about a flash flood risk as well through Saturday morning, especially where you see that red, that maroon color. From Cincinnati to Evansville, Poplar Bluff, even Joplin, we could see some flash flooding. So that's a major concern as you're out and about. You want to take any warnings if you do see some flash flooding or hear about some flash flooding. Rainfall forecast, you can see why we have a flood watch and why we have that flash flooding concern. Because we have that swath of rain, and where you see the oranges and reds, that's where we're seeing that heavy rain or expecting to see that heavy rain throughout portions of Missouri into the Ohio Valley. And again, locally 5 inches. That's on top of some saturated grounds already. We're concerned about the severe weather threat for many reasons. One, it's going to happen at night, so later on this evening into the nighttime hours. That makes it particularly dangerous, so 9 million people at risk. Main threat being that hail, large hail, winds gusting to 60 miles per hour. Could see a tornado or two. We're going to see some really heavy rainfall as well. That threat increases tomorrow. We have a moderate risk. We don't see that often. That's where you see the red, so 17 million at risk, and a few strong tornadoes are possible. So we will certainly keep you up to date on that tomorrow. Winds could exceed 75 miles per hour as well. For the rest of the country, we're looking at spring warmth in portions of the Mid-Atlantic and also the southeast. And then we're watching that Pacific Northwest storm bringing that heavy rain as well, heavy snow as well. We're going to see feet of snow in the Cascades. Back to you guys.
All right, we'll take the spring warmth while we can get it. All right, Michelle, thanks so much.
I agree.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.